just recently discovered that there is coming by in 2032, right? An asteroid that has right now 2.7% chance of hitting the Earth. Now this is the most dangerous asteroid yet discovered, with the highest odds of striking the Earth. It's not huge. I've forgotten the size of it. I should have brushed up on that before the podcast here, but you might look it up. 2032 asteroid impact, and let's see what we get here. But yeah, once we've moved into space, our options for responding to that increase exponentially. Because for one thing, we're already in a position that we could harness dangerous objects, perhaps deflect them from their orbit, if not harvest them and their resources altogether. And of course, all of this stuff is not just flying at us randomly from deep space. It's all out there orbiting. It's in orbits. These orbits are calculable. We can determine the shape of their orbits, the tempo of their orbits, and we see something, we can predict where it's going to be in the future. And we can then access those objects, the most threatening ones, which it turns out are incredibly valuable with all kinds of resources. You finding anything at all?
So yeah, I am real quick. Its rating on the Torino scale is a 3. 1 in 32 chance of hitting as of this most recent article via the new Atlas. So 2.7, its impact probability peaked at 2.7, but it scored, no, excuse me, this is Apophis. The 2032 asteroid is a 3. Is a 3 on the Torino scale.
Okay, so does it
0 to 10? 10 is 100% chance likely,
yeah,
and 0 is 0.
And 3 is
significant.
It's very significant. What's the size of it again? We can get.
I'm looking right now.
Size isn't the only variable.
40 to 90
40
meters
to 90.
wide.
Okay, 90. Okay, so let's say it's 75 meters. Okay, so that's bigger than Tunguska. That's at least 50% bigger than Tunguska. And if it's roughly spherical, a sphere scales by the cube of the radius times 4/3 pi. And that's how you can determine. So this is going to be considerably more destructive. If it was up in the higher range of 90, oh my gosh, now it's almost double the diameter of Tunguska, which means that and if it's an asteroid, see, Tunguska was low density. An asteroid is a much denser object. So all things being equal, an asteroid is going to carry a much stronger kinetic punch than a snowball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it looks like Tunguska was closer to the snowball end of the spectrum. This thing would be a real ass kicking if it hits the Earth. I mean, it would be a real ass kicking. You're talking about an area the size of probably Texas would be pretty much destroyed.
And a nuclear winter that could cause some real damage.
It could cause some real damage. Now, this thing has just been discovered. What was the discovery date of this? What is the name of it? Because that year is always.
Yeah, so the 2032 is the expectation. Let's see. I'm looking right now for the date.
The name of the asteroid.
2024 YR4.
2024 YR4. 2024 YR4. Yeah. Yeah, there's actually an animation of that that's really impressive. And they go to the small side of the spectrum. They use that, but it's still impressive as hell. I saw it earlier. I think it's on a NASA site. Yeah, so that would be a major event. And it would send civilization reeling. There would be no country on Earth that did not experience some after effects of an impact of that magnitude. So this is sobering stuff. This is like, again, I've been saying for decades that this is something we need to take seriously. This is not, again, some sci-fi fantasy, but for most people, when you start talking about space, it's just outside their framework of reference because people have been conditioned to be so constricted in their thinking. They're no longer capable of exercising their mind to the extent that they can comprehend we're actually part of a bigger picture. And we have to be thinking big picture if we're going to survive long term. Now, I guess it is that maybe the way it's the human species is divided up, that not everybody can see the big picture. Okay, I admit that and acknowledge that and recognize that. But at the same time, if there's a significant percentage, let's say if 5% of the human population needs to be thinking long term and large scale, the rest of the 95% to survive, well, yeah, if that shrinks to 2%, yeah, then we might start getting in trouble. If it shrinks to 1%, if it expands to 10% of the human population is considering the larger picture and the longer term prospects of human civilization and life on Earth and so on, yeah, that massively increases our probabilities of surviving and being successful. So our education right now system, at least in America, is not oriented towards that. It's oriented about indoctrinating children into this constricted worldview, and there's just a whole set of irrelevant distractions that they're being spoon-fed, and it's a clutter that needs to be cleared out. And the left side of the political spectrum is all, up in arms and hysterical over the possibility of the Department of Education being shut down. Well, then I would bring up the point that, when was it started by Jimmy Carter in 1979? How come as soon as we empowered a large government education bureaucracy, that from that point on, education standards started to go into decline, and they've declined ever since. That literally people were coming up, graduating from high school, going to college and so on, and they were more educated than they are now in the era when when the Department of Education did not exist. Okay. So I don't see this big tragedy ensuing if the Department of Education and all this top heavy administrative bureaucracy has to go find other jobs. And that money, 100 billion or so a year, is released back into the private sector and will within 1 or 2 years fuel a massive renaissance in private sponsored education. And at that point, the worst of the alternatives will be as good or better than the best of the government-run system. I guarantee you that's going to be the case. But what's holding us up? Just this is the state of too many people's minds, thinking that, the only way people are going to get educated is if we empower a gigantic, wasteful, bloated government bureaucracy that then uses the educational system to propagate its own agenda. Well, hopefully, we're going to be done with all of that soon.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And if you look at the averages, I think it's about $1,000 to homeschool your own kids versus a year versus 47 in a lot of districts. It's the same thing with the space program. And you're seeing that, go figure, the private sector, when tasked correctly, in cooperation correctly with the government, with good oversight, there's a lot of yeah buts. But as long as all of that is adhered to, it's amazing what can get done and what is getting done in the private sector with all of these companies that are now being tasked by NASA to deliver payloads.
That is a great development. And, I'm not so extreme in my views that I just, like earlier admitted, look, there are some government agencies whose value exceeds the cost of their existence, right? I named the U.S. Geological Survey. Their work is of incredible importance. Without their work, there would be no civilization as we know it, because it's the work of the geologists, many of them who were with the U.S. Geological Survey, that have mapped out bedrock, that have and the types of bedrock, the types of lithology, the types of petrology from which we have been able to extract the energy that has fueled the rise of our civilization, right? Now, I'm of the mind that this fossil fuel driven period of human civilization is merely an intermediate level of evolution of civilization. I think we're on the verge, literally, of in the next decade moving beyond fossil fuels, because I'm convinced that there are alternate technologies that are now being developed and waiting in the wings. But the point is that the whole fossil fuel driven civilization that we've created in the last century and a half, right, would be indispensable. Without that, we're not getting out into space. Life is not getting off the planet. But once we get off the planet, now we've got options. We've got prospects for things that, it's out there in space where solar energy is actually going to be a viable energy source, not down here on the surface of the planet, right? Where it's, day-night cycle, where it's, rain, where it's clouds, where it's, if the sun ain't shining, if the wind ain't blowing, right? But out there in space, solar energy really does become a viable energy source. And then there's the whole other new technologies that are coming into development. So again, without the fossil fuel-based civilization, we would not have gotten to where we're at now. There would be no satellites, relay satellites up there in orbit around the Earth, allowing you and me to, you're out in Texas, I'm in Georgia, right? We couldn't have done this 20 years ago. We certainly couldn't have done this. This would have been my generation coming up in the 50s and 60s. If we saw something like this would be like something out of, again, like something out of Star Wars. This would be something like out of Star Trek. It would be magic, right? But because we've seen it emerging incrementally, we sort of come to just take it for granted, which I, of course, don't. I'm always thinking about the fact that wasn't long ago we couldn't do this. But, they used to use the term with respect to television back in the 60s as the vast wasteland, right? Well, in some ways, the whole internet has degenerated. There's a whole side of the internet that's just a vast wasteland, right? Now, there's awesomely good things that can come on it. But, man, I tell you, some of the stuff I see online, it's like, oh, my God. People are just obsessing over things that are of no consequence at all. Of course, it's all of this, the social media stuff that's reinforcing all of the propaganda that's being instilled into the minds of young people in government-run education. So, space program, I believe, is one of several things that are going to provide antidotes to that.